Hello everyone and welcome back after the coffee break. Our session number 5 is about to begin, and I'm happy to, we will have 3 presenters, and I'm happy to announce the first one, Višnja, Kačić, Rogošić, coming from University of Zagreb, Croatia, who will tell us about the legacy of Sergije Glumac. Glumac. Right. The floor is
actually
yours.
meaning actor in Croatian language.
Oh.
The word Glumac.
Okay. Right. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The legacy of Sergije Glumac. The only history of Croatian theatre, which was sadly written in 1978 by a renowned theatre scholar Nikola Batušić, barely mentions Sergije Glumac as one of the painters hired on the position of the assistant stage designer at Croatian National Theatre in Zagreb in the interwar period. Among a number of sets, mostly for opera and ballet, that Glumac created from 1930 to 1937, the author emphasizes only his solution for Shakespeare's Julius Caesar from 1934. It is described as the first set envisioned on a newly acquired revolving stage, where the space is reduced to, quote, architectonic elements almost in the style of Edward Gordon Craig, end quote, and we could add Leopold Jesner. So this is the sketch for that scenography, for that stage design, and this is another sketch from his period as official stage designer and costume designer at Croatian National Theatre. What is important to notice is that the first official stage designer was hired at Croatian National Theatre in 1909, and the first costume designer was not hired until the half of the several decades later, 1950s. So basically at this period, stage designers were also costume designers. It was all considered as one profession, and one person was responsible for that visual aspect of the scene. That can also explain why, while in his previous proposals that were discovered years later, Glumac included both stage design and set designs and costume designs. So, however, the discovery at the beginning of the 1990s of a series of intriguing stage and costume design proposals, as well as studies of movement in Glumac's heritage, instigated the re-evaluation of his position in the history of Croatian theatre. The designs were probably made in the 1920s, during the time he spent in Berlin, Zagreb and Paris, and were never explored on stage. However, they reflect a powerful and imaginative connection with the historical avant-garde, making his opus an inventive contribution to the international avant-garde scene, and the praised Julius Caesar set a repercussion of his previous ideas. The following paper will therefore join the ongoing revision, and while in its first part I will shortly present the avant-garde stage of Sergije Glumac, in the second I will try to contribute to the gradual formation of the trajectory of related spatial conceptions in Croatian stage design, from the historical avant-garde to its near and post variants. The correspondence between the work of Sergije Glumac and that of some of his local contemporaries has already been noted and somewhat explored. As possible inspiration for his ideas, theatre scholars and art historians tend to emphasize constructivist costume and set design made by the painter Josip Sisal for the performance of high school group Traveleri from 1922, and abstract set design made by the painter Ljubo Babić for Branko Gavella's staging of Shakespeare's plays also in the early 1920s. The continuation of that aesthetic line is visible in the following decades. For example, in the reduced functional sets of the stage designer Želimir Zagota in the 1950s, or in the scenographic opus of the architect Vjenceslav Richter, whose designs from the same period explore the optical potential of geometrical forms. Still, possible relation between the avant-garde legacy of Sergije Glumac and Croatian present-day scene is under-examined. Therefore, the second part of the presentation will focus on the collective noumen for use, whose work manifests similar sources of influence, similar interdisciplinary approach to stage design, and similar aesthetic choices. Sergije Glumac is one of the most important Croatian artists, especially of the interwar period, though he was creatively active from the middle of the 1920s to the middle of the 1950s in a variety of fields such as graphics, commercial graphic design and advertising, as well as stage design. The proposals he made for the avant-garde theatre were created at the very beginning of his artistic career in correlation with the European avant-garde, but as a personal interpretation of the then current movements. Namely, from 1923 till 1927, Glumac was educated in Berlin, where he spent a single semester studying architecture, in Zagreb at the Academy of Fine Arts, where he studied drawing and graphics, and in Paris, where he spent 2 semesters at the school of the Cubist painter André Lot at Rue d'Odès. As emphasized by art historian Lovorka Magaš-Bilandžić, life in European metropolis exposed him to contemporary tendencies in theatre and progressive approach to the shaping of the performance space, from the ideas of important reformers such as Adolf Appia and Edward Gordon Craig to the Bauhaus research of mechanical and plastic theatre, from futurist and constructivist experiments to the rich and influential stage designs of ballets Russes by Sergei Diaghilev, which he has seen on the exhibitions and in Paris theatres. The influence is evident in around 100 works for the avant-garde stage, varying from simply sketched to carefully completed ones. They comprise studies of movement as a visual interpretation of guest performances by Rudolf Laban's dance troupe in 1924 in Zagreb. This is one of those sketches, and it is very, I mean, it's important to note that his sketches are basically the only visual representation of that important event. Rudolf Laban's dance troupe was in Zagreb for about a month, so in the history of Croatian dance, this is considered relevant material. In addition, those sketches comprise costume design proposals for specific or unidentified performances. These are 2 examples. They were also influenced by then contemporary fashion, as well as stage design proposals. Due to the limitations of a conference presentation, I will focus on the last segment of his work, which can be further divided into 3 categories. A. Stage solutions for specific literary works such as Goethe's Faust, Ibsen's A Doll's House, or Rotonda, written by Croatian expressionist playwright Josip Kosor. B. The studies of mechanical and plastic theatre, which are considered the most intriguing part of his scenographic legacy. And C. A number of proposals for performances which could not be identified. When it comes to designs for specific literary works, Glumac's choice of various classical and contemporary plays was most probably influenced by the repertories of Paris, Berlin and Zagreb theatres in the 1920s and the writing of his coevals, yet he remained consistent in his approach to diverse aesthetics. He decided on texts with strong protagonists, internal conflicts and tensions corresponding to the social and cultural prosperity, but also perturbation of the crazy years. He then interpreted them associatively by reflecting the key idea of the play and through the frozen images of particular scenes, rather than just set pieces, thus emphasizing the dynamic aspect of a particular design. Visual vocabulary and approach, however, was obtained from a variety of avant-garde sources, from expressive characters in simplified abstract spaces with bright colors and decorative and geometrical samples to geometrical figurines and cubist collage. So I'm just going to show 2 of those. This is his suggestion for Faust, and this is his suggestion for Ibsen's A Doll's House. You can notice that that he wrote Ibsen Nora underneath the sketch. This is the indication that he was for example, influenced by the then current repertories. For example, in the 1923, Ibsen's A Doll's House was playing in Berlin under the title Nora, so you can see the relation there. Most of the designs for unidentified performances are equally dominated by oversized geometrical elements, pyramids, cubes, and spheres in clear and intensive colors. Recognizable motifs suggest modern-day surrounding, urban environment, a hotel lobby, engine room, and even a chemistry lab, although Glumac persistently rejects mimetic sets and signalizes the location with unavoidable details, such as commercial posters or lab equipment subjected to significant alienation or distortion. These are two examples. Stage design proposals for mechanical and plastic theatre, however, represent a much more radical spatial experiment and a shift towards greater autonomy of the stage designer, who partially takes over the authority of the theatre director. As perceived by art historian Vladimir Malejković in his analytical fragmentation of the scene, Glumac applies the reasoning of an architect, interested primarily in the visual structure of the scene. Therefore, the stage is reduced to a number of static and movable abstract set pieces in various colors. The actor becomes geometrically shaped figurine or a marionette, while the scene action, we might assume, very much consists of the dynamic interplay between them and the optical effect it might produce. Those assumptions are further supported by Glumac's sketches of vertical and horizontal movement of set elements as a choreographic plan for the dance of abstract bodies and surfaces. So this is a sequence of the designs for mechanical and plastic theatre. Sometimes he calls it, the name is derived from his sketches. Mostly he titles it mechanical theatre, but sometimes it's also plastic theatre, so I'm using both terms. What is important to notice is the arrows on top of the sketch, which suggest the directions in which set pieces should move. Also, he added separate sketches where he indicated how these particular pieces should move horizontally and vertically. And this is one of the figurines, so basically it can be interpreted as costume design for mechanical and plastic theatre. Well informed about European avant-garde projects, mostly through domestic and international art journals and word of mouth, Zagreb art scene helped in developing Glumac's interests, but as it was rather skeptical towards experimental theatre itself, it did not provide many opportunities for actual creative activity. Consequently, as far as we know, Croatian avant-garde scene did not directly benefit from the ideas of Sergije Glumac. The injustice was corrected on the international level when two of his designs for Goethe's Faust, alongside the work of Ljubo Babić, were included in the International Theatre Exposition held in New York City in 1926 and curated by Friedrich Kiesler, thus bringing the author at least some official recognition for his progressive work. However, the principles he explored still found their way to the contemporary Zagreb scene, which this time offered strong institutional, financial and technological support, as evident in the creative achievements of Numen for Use. Numen for Use is a Croatian-Austrian collective of graphic and product designers formed in 1998, who since becoming involved with scenography in 2004 have built a fruitful international career, acknowledged with important regional awards such as Prague Quadrennial Gold Medal for the Best Scene Design and the Best Use of Theatre Technology in 2011. Just like Glumac, they surpassed limitations imposed by artistic disciplines and, while continuing their activity in both areas, have also expanded their work into the field of installation art, which in turn has influenced their perception of performance space. Thus, the following statement by one of the founding members, Sven Jonke, considering different approaches to stage design, provides both the guiding principle of Newman's work and a possible interpretation of Glumac's methodology. Quote, "Painters illustrate, they paint sets. Architects offer spatial solutions, but they are called minimalistic clean. Product design is a good starting point for a stage designer because in theater there are so many elements you need to connect, and we are taught that multifunctional approach. Nothing should be superfluous, everything has to be useful." End quote. In accordance, these artists explicitly refer to the influence of Bauhaus, Constructivism, Suprematism, and European abstract and concrete art, which places the collective within the aesthetic horizon shared by Sergije Glumac and explains their tendency to reject mimetic and illustrative solutions, choosing instead visual abstraction and conceptual approach to set design. Although Newman for use collaborates with some of the most prominent directors in the region, such as Tomasz Pandur, Janusz Kica, or Alexander Popovsky, incentive for their solutions comes from the text, rather than director's interpretation of one. Like Glumac, they too opt for the scenography of meaning. This is the term of Milenko Misailovic, Serbian theater scholar, which embodies the thought or concept dominating the specific work of literature. Thus, the plot of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, set in motion by a shipwreck, develops among tangled ropes attached to the revolving stage. Ups and downs of Cinderella's fate occur on a circular version of Jesner's Steps, while the stereotypes of EU identity are best perceived against the blue of the Unity's flag. The clarity of the idea is mirrored in the purity of the stage design. Newman's solutions are defined by clean lines, geometrical elements, symmetry and balance, enhanced with clear colors and bold contrasts in stage lighting. The symbolism further develops through the ongoing dynamic restructuring of the stage, shifting cubes, rotating round elements, entangling and disentangling ropes, fragmenting and connecting set pieces, which embrace movement as the governing principle, perform alongside actors' bodies, and provide impressive visual stimulus. These are the examples from the performances. The first one is Cinderella, directed by Robert Walto. They're all from Zagreb theaters, although Newman worked for also international theaters or on the international scene. So this is Cinderella, and it shows how the set is combined of fixed elements and rotating elements. So basically throughout the performance, what we get as the audience is different versions of staircases on the scene. The second one is Caligula, which was directed by Tomasz Pandur in the City Drama Theatre Gavella, which is composed of shifting cubes on the scene, which hide and reveal certain scenes between them, and also the floor is covered in water, so everything is doubled and reflected in water, and there's a kind of symmetry there. It's more visible in this photo. The second one is Europa, which was directed by Janusz Kica in Zagreb Youth Theatre, and you can see the stage initially as the inside of the white cube. Above it is the projection of that same stage, only it is composed of 4 different cameras. And in the corner is a set of posters, well, you can say it like that, in blue color. That is the blue of the EU flag. What happens is that throughout the performance, performers glue those posters on the floor and on the walls of the white cube, of the inside of the white cube, and slowly it transforms into the blue cube, with the number of squares gradually becoming just a flat blue surface. But what is even more interesting is that blue surface in the projection, which is above the scene is used as the effect, well, it is the effect of blue screen is applied to that. So basically a blue surface is used as the surface on which another image is projected, and that is the Baroque painting of the abduction of Europe. And the last one is the these are two scenes from their 12th night, not there, Alexander Popovsky directed it at Croatian National Theatre in Zagreb. What they did is, they connected a number of ropes with the revolving stage on the bottom and of course the top of the performance. And the set changes as the stage revolves. So basically, depending on the position of the revolving stage, we can get just stripes of white ropes, or we can get something that is half tangled and or completely tangled like this. And obviously, it's very symbolical on the level of content of Shakespeare's plays. For example, at the end of the performance, all the ropes are detached and they just vanish from the stage, obviously. So, to conclude, Newman's designs are offered as the only solution for a particular text and without compromise. But such importance of the stage design for the totality of the scenic action and authorial vision of the performance unsurprisingly leads towards the attempt to gain complete independence from or claim the authority of the playwright and theatre director. Newman, for use, will make that step with the installations categorized as self-sufficient stage designs without the performance. This is the quotation of Sven Jonke, which they have been creating since 2008. This is the example of one of such installations. Another versions, so this is tape. Another versions could be void or net or string, so they're created with different materials. Those abstract structures develop from their stage designs and represent the application of the same principle as, quote, "It is a typical designer's reasoning when you transfer the inspiration from one field to another," end quote. However, exhibited objects soon evolve into voluminous spatial constructions which serve not as a disruption but as a continuation of the space, luring the visitors inside and yearning to realize their performative potential. And as the visitors explore usually elevated, sometimes surreal and enclosed or void space, the interplay of human and abstract bodies continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our second presenter today is Valentina Chechik, who is coming from Kharkiv State Academy of Design and Fine Arts. And she will tell us about Khvostenko, Khvostov, the Semaphores of Theatrical Suprematism. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
One can state that Alexander Khvostenko or Les Khvostov is a colorist, an impulsive artist, immensely generous in his plastic rhythms, in the means of expression, fused then in a rather unexpected way, often the extreme. He entered the history of Ukrainian culture, is an artist of the theater. Development of his art took place along the lines of mastering plastic innovations and discoveries of domestic and foreign isms. In 1920, Khvostenko created the brightest examples of avant-garde scenography, including suprematist variations, which were established in performances Mr. Bouffe, The Jewels of the Madonna and Valkyria, within equal intervals of time from 1921 to 1925 to 1928. 9, sorry. Today they can be seen as special symbolic marks called by Kazimir Malevich Semaphores of Suprematism. Born into a family of Ukrainian icon painters, Khvostenko carefully studied secular art at the Moscow School of Painting, Sculpture and Architecture. The school gained its democratic reputation and kept its doors open for students from all over the Russian Empire. Just a moment. Yeah. In different years, famous Ukrainians studied here, namely sculptor Alexander Archipenko, painters Aleksa Grishenko and David Burlyuk. Independent work of Khvostenko began with drawing caricatures for Moscow newspapers. This is where pseudonym Khvostov was originated. During the time of his studies, artist earned additionally as a stage designer at the local cabaret. Later, when he moved to Kiev in 1918, both talents were in demand by Agitprop, the propaganda department of the Central Community of the All-Union Communist Party of Bolshevik. Additionally, Khvostenko created political murals and posters which were grotesque caricature with elements for the walk art. I don't have these posters, these simples, but I have I'm sorry. I have simples which Khvostenko make later. The Khvostenko path to abstract art was laid through the Alexandra Ekster studio in Kiev. I'm sorry. The workshop opened in the autumn of 1918 on the Funduklivskaya street, soon renamed to the studio, immediately became the most active center of the new art. Literally everyone was involved, drawn to the studio, both beginners and already experienced artists. According to an art historian, Georgy Kovalenko, the leading expert in the field, the list itself and creative achievements were outstanding. They declared the formation of the Ekster school and, above all, the schools of scenography. The talent and scale of Ekster's personality did not raise doubts among her natives. Critics pointed to her exceptional self-discipline, rare seriousness and thoughtfulness of researchers. Theoretical and practical classes conducted by Ekster were teaching information about art not based on what was read in reviews and catalogs, but provided by creator own knowledge and art. She is all French in her art. Benedict Lifshitz recalled her, highlighting the fact that she lived between two cities, Kiev and Paris. Ekster visited the Parisian Academy of Grand Chamier and was in friendly and creative relationship with many French artists and writers like Pablo Picasso, Guillaume Apollinaire, Sonia and Robert Delaunay. She was close friends with Fernand Léger and learned a lot from him. Khvostov was witnessing Esther's creative Moscow triumph and recognition of her art by colleagues and critics. In 1917, when he graduated from the school, her name filled pages on the local periodical, advertising posters and bills. Abramov Ross, the art critics, Moscow art critics, subtly noticed that Esther struck with an extraordinary color and plastic mastery, but her art rushed towards even larger abstraction. Her art marked the entry of Suprematism, one of the current versions of the abstract art, in objective, special environment. During the autumn of 1917, she took part in the exhibition of the Moscow artistic collaboration Bubnovy Ballet, where she exposed 67, according to other sources, 19 abstract paintings and graphics. She was an organizer and the author of contemporary decorative art exhibition. The display revealed samples of bags, shirts, scarves, screens and pillows which Ukrainian peasants from the village Verbovka near Kiev embroidered based on Esther and her colleagues' sketches. Moreover, in the autumn of 1917, Esther was the stenographer for the Salome performance that took place at the Moscow Tairov Chamber Theatre. In 1918, the performance design was recreated into the form of sketches and models and revealed during her studio lecture in Kiev. Kiev is where the inevitable personal acquaintance between the two artists, Khvostenko and Esther, took place. Khvostenko made his final decision to turn into the theater direction and at the Esther studio. During her master classes, he became imbued with the philosophy and aesthetics of avant-garde, spirit of experimentation, research of contemporary forms of theatrical scenery and ideas of kinetic space of the stage, supported in its plastic phrases by discoveries of abstract painting. The earliest example known today of implementing these ideas in the theater, Ballet Khvostenko, in the theatrical of the production of 1921, Mystery Bull by Vladimir Mayakovsky. Following the Russian poet, futurist, the author of the revolutionary utopia, fantastic travesty, Les Khvostenko brought the action on the planetary scales. When the portal curtain was open, the universe came to life and the planet Earth in its center appeared. The hemisphere with marked meridians and parallels overlapped a part of the orchestra pit. The action was organically transferred into the porter. Painting increased the boundary effect between the stage and audience. The painting decorated with the backdrop, side scenes and the under-bridge space, but also the stage portals and the first lodges. The portal curtain was created specifically for the show. The sketch is now stored in the founds of the Moscow Theatre Museum named Alexei Bakhrushin, and in 2014 it became the emblem of the Russian Avant-Garde Theatre Revolution and Design exhibition at Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Khvostenko called the geometric collage of multicolored paper stripes, namely hot shades of red, yellow, and orange, the suprematist composition explosion. And they did not happen by accident. The artist used technical skills of the portal curtain in an original way. The curtain shot upward under the noise accompaniment by Boris Yanovsky, a Kharkov composer, and the colors geometry filled up in all directions, as if the most powerful cosmogonic explosion has caused it. This is there one sketch by Khvostenko in left corner, and other sketch by Alexandra Exter. I think about the coloristic. The sensation of the universal cataclysm, global catastrophe, disappeared, the faded away within the measured image of the solar symbolism. There were no scenery. Journalists shared with him impressions. The stage was decorated with bright paintings, and a joyful feeling of a shouting holiday was created by its dazzling colors. Later on, in 1925, Khvostenko created equally powerful in themes of color suprematist stage design for the Ermanno Wolf-Ferrari opera The Jewels of the Madonna. Nikolai Bogolyubov, a Russian opera director who visited the premiere, remembered regretfully that he hoped to see on a stage sunny Naples, a bright blue bay, Vesuvius in a light haze, cypresses and proud heads of Italian stone pines. But what he saw reminded him of the Berlin Circus Schumann. Indeed, huge multicolored canvases rose above the stage on trapezes and ropes like flags and banners under the circus dome. The broken line architectural structure looked like a machine for acrobatics, with it ups and down. On the left there was a wide staircase with low height steps in the center, and on the right there were platforms of various height with balconies, ramps, inclines and springboards. However, in the third act, natural Italian landscape did appear on the stage. Khvostenko added the panorama panorama of Naples in the form of a huge-size postcard replica by a famous Italian photographer, Edizioni Brogi. It was a decoration discredited from the traditional canons, very similar to aesthetics by German Dadaists. Worth noting, Alexander Khvostenko's production set for Jewels of the Madonna was a beginning of the Ukrainian musical scene experiment between the leaders of avant-garde during 1927-1932 years. Apart from Khvostenko, modern vocabulary was introduced in a clumsy and bulky musical scene body by Anatoly Petritsky and Ivan Narazyan Nazarov and Kurechka, Armashevsky and other artists. It was a bright and final period for Ukrainian avant-garde scenography and in general for Ukrainian art, theater, literature avant-garde. Alexander Khvostenko was working on a set designed for Richard Wagner's opera Valkyria in 1929. It was supposed to be fantastic in its visuals, plastic and dynamics performance, and most radical experiment realizing the concept of the world as the relevance. Unfortunately, it was not staged. In periodical, the artist's explanatory note has been preserved. The constructive installation was a complex engineered structure, the function of which was to set in motion a system of colorful panels. The principle of contrast was a foundation for the composed score of plastic and coloristic transformations. The artist opposed straight lines with curves matched the color, length and texture of materials. For example, planes in the shape of a rounded rectangle were used in the Hundin scenes. The artist made texture heavier by using 6 shades of brown and in addition to satin and tulle, flannel and velvet. The theme of Sieglinde was revealed through light, floating and transparent fabrics carved in the form of circles, painted in warm and cold saturated shades of red color. In Valkyria, Khvostenko came up with Suprematism, 3-dimensional constructions, and from that to even greater abstractions of the scenographic plot. In addition, the plot was completely free from objectivity and sight of the scene. Multicolor planes formed the special environment, structured, divided and limited the space, then regulated it by either expanding or narrowing, both vertically and horizontally as well as in depth. At the same time, plastic color combinations worked towards the disclosure of the opera's psychological points, launched associative processes and appealed to the viewer's imagination. To To sum up, many artists were involved in the Ukrainian avant-garde laboratory of the liberal and unrestrained colors plastic creativity. Here we can recall original works by Vadim Meller, Anatoly Petritsky, Boris Kosarev, Naum Sobol, and Vladimir Müller. All of them rarely stopped using suprematist aesthetics in the costume design creation, yet suprematist cosmos by Alexander Khvostenko was one of a kind visual example. The Alexander Khvostenko's experiment was impressive for his open and exhibited a creative mind, for his elegance and risk newness. Consistency and artistic logic of Les Khvostenko's scenography is obvious in his experiments with abstract elements. Logically, in the performance Mystère Bouffe, suprematist painting created the visual image. In the jewels of the Madonna, abstract elements excited on a level with an architectural plastic. Ultimately, in the setting of the opera production Valkyria, construction of the multicolored geometric planes replaced the picturesque painting and architecture. Despite this, it was the theater of the Les Khvostenko where abstract art as the synthesis of form, colors, and movement revealed and demonstrated its ultimate possibilities. It exposed an opportunity to create a universal model of a kinetic and mobile space. It has shown a possibility to express the interval content or idea through the primary elements of colors and form, to express interval state of the character, their emotional vibrations, psychological moments of the action, and to accompany it. And lastly, it provided a chance to realize the most incredible modern production ideas. One way or another, abstractivism plastic discoveries went through the artist's individuality and gained their right for theatrical citizenship, as Vasil Khmury, Ukrainian critic, once figuratively noted. Thank you, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Right, so last but not least, our third presenter, Zoltán Imre, coming to us from Eötvös University in Budapest, Hungary, who will tell us about Olga Szentpál and the erasement of modern dance in Hungary. The floor is yours.
It's okay. So thank you very much for the introduction. Okay, I have slightly changed my title. So the new title is Olga Szentpál and the Erasement of Modern Dance in Hungary in the 50s, and I'm going to start with a long quotation by her. Yeah, the quotation is from 1951. It's a long phrase, and I'm using these long phrases from an enquete and from her in order to show you how complicated was the issue of modern dance in the 1950s. So, overall, I am to declare that modern dance was essentially individualist, bourgeois art, which refuses traditions. What I have so far failed to do now in front of the assembly, I would like to emphasize strongly that through long years of experiences and my inner struggles, I had to break radically with modern dance. My definite opinion is that we must build our socialist dance culture onto such progressive traditions and ballet and folk dance, following the model of the Soviet Union. The ex-modern dancers must radically reject the bourgeois ideology of modern dance. What we never felt in capitalism, what we never achieved at that time, now we can participate in the formation of our socialist culture and the building of socialism. Strong words, carefully selected, carefully articulated, but full of passion and hatred towards herself. These are the words of one of the most experimental Hungarian modern dance choreographers, teachers and theoreticians, Olga Szentpál. In 1951, she was asked, to be honest, to be forced by the Minister of Culture to give an introductory lecture at the General Meeting on Modern Dance. Her lecture was supposed to clarify her more than 30 years of involvement, and at the same time she was also expected to condemn the entire modern dance movement and her role in it. It was a public condemnation, called at that time as public self-criticism. My paper uses Szentpál as an example to highlight how the Hungarian avant-garde, especially modern dance, was consciously erased in the 1950s, and how later this kind of great forgetting became the great tradition. So I'm going to speak about amnesia, like in the previous section, but I don't use the word amnesia because I think erasement is more radical than amnesia. So in order to understand the situation of the Hungarian avant-garde, we have to go back to the 1920s, and shortly and very briefly I am trying to introduce the so-called Horthy regime, the political, economic and cultural situation of the Horthy regime, and situate the Hungarian avant-garde within that context. So, the Hungarian avant-garde and the Horthy regime between the two world wars. The Hungarian avant-garde experiments work parallel and in dialogue with the contemporary Eastern and Western avant-garde tendencies, so it was part of the work we were discussing yesterday, adapting different aesthetics and poetics, and provided opportunities to experiment with new methods and genres. Using various materials, mediums, technologies, and body representations, they questioned the borders of traditional theater and dance. Women were important contributors to these events, especially for the newly established genre of modern dance. They don't call it modern dance, they call it, after the German expression, artistic dance, but I prefer the term modern dance because it's more up-to-date now. Their experiments were extended onto the presentation of the female body on and off stage. Presenting the female body on stage, their experiments basically questioned the dominant female ideals of the national conservative Horthy regime. The regime between the two world wars were called Horthy regime after the leader Miklos Horthy, and that's why I use the term Horthy. The ideology of the emerging new Hungary was basically defined by two factors. Hungary had been defeated in World War I, and in consequence of this, she had been forced to sign the Treaty of Trianon. By the treaty, Hungary lost 71% of its historical territory and 64% of its earlier population, causing severe economic, bureaucratic, social and cultural problems. Due to the new circumstances, perceived as national disaster by the Hungarians, Hungary was to redefine itself. The redefinition focused on the idea of revision, the recuperation of the territorial integrity of historical Hungary, and the unification of the Hungarians within and outside of Hungary. Hungary's self-appointed mission was to unite and lead the various ethnic nationals under its own leadership within the Carpathian Basin. I'm not sure that the other nations were too happy about this project, but the Hungarian was at that time. So, as a result, the revision of the Horthy regime focused on the re-evaluation of the present from the past and aimed to recreate the situation already available in the historical past in the possible future. The Hungarian avant-garde experiments had to find their function within this historical and political context. In their introduction of his book, Avant-Garde Performance and Material Exchange, Mike Sell pointed out that the European avant-garde was, I quote, a formation that challenges power in subversive, illegal, or alternative ways, usually by challenging the routines, assumptions, hierarchies, and/or legitimacy of existing political and/or cultural institutions. End of quote. The European avant-garde can be defined with clairvoyant words as a challenge to fashions and habitually accepted conventions. As a result, the avant-garde is also interested in revision. This revision, however, was designed to revise the basic principles of the present, to reject the official ideology of the present, and to create a new, possible better future. Connected to the West and East European avant-garde circles, the Hungarian avant-garde experiments also question traditions, their continuity, the legitimacy of the existing political and cultural establishment. They were interested in revoking the traditional principles and methods of the present for a better future. Apart from its revisionary aims, the Hungarian avant-garde was connected to the workers' movement. The left-wing ideology and its political, cultural, and social appearances were also interested in revision. They were supposed to revise the given political, economic, social, and cultural order and the status quo. As a result, the Hungarian avant-garde experiments and its connections and their connections with the workers' movement could not receive positive interpretation from the official cultural politics and its institutions. The Horthy regime was hostile towards them, and their official establishment obstructed with all possible means the avant-garde experiments, often using the police and/or administrative orders. Avant-garde experiments were regarded as dangerous since they questioned the values, hierarchies, traditions, and institutions which the Horthy regime would have liked to present as permanent, continuous, and omnipotent in the service of territorial and national unification. As a result, the Hungarian avant-garde existed in a marginal situation, both culturally and economically. The Hungarian avant-garde dance Women and Olga Szentpál. As part of the Hungarian avant-garde, modern dance appeared at the beginning of the 20th century after foreign models Delsart, Dalcroze, Duncan, Wigman, Mensendink, and others. Soon, however, different schools of movement and dance were established with their own distinct system of movement. Valeria Dienes, you can see her there. Alice Magyar, the last conference I spoke about Alice Magyar in detail, and if you have the book, there is a chapter on her. Olga Szentpál, and others. These schools preferred the free movement of the body and stood in opposition to the strict system of the ballet. Later it's going to be very important. The lifestyle of the petty bourgeoisie and the dehumanizing conditions of modern life. Free movement was called pure, abstract, absolute, expressive, or simply modern dance. The different schools let's stay here. The different schools, however, did not deal only with modern dance, but attempted to integrate these new techniques into everyday life. The teachers of free movement wanted to liberate humankind and propagated that movement has the power to change the world. Similarly, the 20th century European avant-garde, as Alice Erjavec pointed out, not only offered new artistic representation of the world, but also demanded that art transforms the world rather only representing it. End of quote. Most of the Hungarian avant-garde artists regarded art not necessarily only as an autonomous activity, but rather they considered it as an activity with ideological, political, and pedagogical stakes, which is not independent of, but can be integrated into the contemporary social and cultural context. Similarly to other dance movement schools, I mean the Hungarian dance movement school, the aim of Szentpál school was not only to train professional dancers, but mainly to create a special female body culture, recognizing the physical, psychic, and social meanings of the female body. As the founder of a new body management school, her method, her lifestyle, and her new values push the borders of traditional femininity, creating new perspectives for the revision and realization of the modern female gender roles. Consequently, her approach went beyond the art world, and she utilized her artistic expressions and methods to make everyday life a better place, especially for women. Having received her degree in piano at the Hungarian Music Academy of Budapest, Szentpál received her diploma from the Delacroix School in Hellerau in 1917. When she returned to Hungary as a Delacroix teacher, she taught at various performing arts institutions before establishing her own school of movement in 1919. Apart from practicing it in the school, she published her own system of movement in a book, Tánc és mozgásművészet könyve. That's the book. You can see the cover of the book, and there are various modern dance or artistic dance, and how these modern movements can be applied to everyday life, and especially for a gymnastic for women. The book was published in 1927. Apart from working for various theater companies and various avant-garde formations, she created her own dance company called Szentpál Tánccsoport in 1925. She staged more than 100 choreographies. Like this one, that was a solo dance piece from 1909 called Fúria Tánc, Furry Dance. Or it was a little bit later, Deep Under the Sea, called Tengermélye. That was called Kezek Tánca, the dance of the hands, or a small piece called Baby a Bárba, Baby in the Bar. It's a large-scale production called Gépember, Machine Man from 1935. And it was called Magyar Halottas, Hungarian Funerals from 1936. Like many other female choreographers of the time, Szentpál questioned the ideals of the conservative Horthy regime, defining women's roles within the family as housewives and mothers. Immediately after World War II, she became very active again. She reopened her school in 1947, became one of the vice presidents of the Dance Association, and taught at the Theatre Academy, the Academy of Music, and the College of Physical Education, where there was a program for a while to train modern dance teachers. After the communist takeover in 1949, however, dance was radically changed. So now I have to speak about a little bit this communist takeover and then the enquete on modern dance. Seizing power by forging the results of the 1948 election, and with the help of the Red Army, of course, the communist regime promised a new world. Its rhetoric attempted both to revise the national traditions for its own communist purpose and to represent itself as the sole continuation of these traditions. Its ideologies created a new national repertoire of historical events, stories, and heroes, and its rhetoric focused partly on the constant threat posed by Western capitalist aggressors, and partly on a close political unity with the friendly Soviet Union. Attempting to invade the spheres of public and private life, communist ideology attempted to revise the entire society, discipline its people, and reconsider culture and art. In the 1950s, the arts were considered as weapons of the communist propaganda and the fronts of the ideological struggle. Theatre and dance were also to serve the development of socialism and create a new socialist society. The ideological colonization of theatre practically meant that the economic situation of the theatres was stabilized by state ownership in 1949, which guaranteed state support for the entire theatre system. In exchange, however, the state gained total control over theatre's working mechanism. Communist ideologists selected the licensed plays, and the staging style was defined by social realism, focused on the officially acknowledged Soviet-style Stanislavski method. In this context, the 1951 enquête was supposed to purify the dance. Though it seemed spontaneous, it was well prepared. A year earlier, in 1950, the Dance Association issued a long proposal circulated within the dance elite, which simply declared that, I quote, "For modern dancers, the progressive art means a break with modern dance." Then it continued that the modern dancers remained on the ground of bourgeois decadency. As modern dance cannot be valuable for us to build our socialist culture, we must reject the entire movement. Some of the practitioners, however, can still be valuable. Those who turn against to be here. So sorry about this. Okay, where we are. Where we were. Thank you. Yes, yes, some of the practitioners. Yes, thank you, thank you. You are listening to me. Okay. Some of the practitioners, however, can still be valuable. Those who turn against the bourgeois formalism of modern dance with consistent self-criticism. It wasn't enough. It also stated that we openly declare modern dance as a reactionary movement which has no place in our dance culture, neither in general nor in its details. We take this question to the public through a public meeting and the press. All who stand honestly in the service of our socialist dance culture, after the needed amount of self-criticism, must help the work of the Dance Association, which honestly tries to follow the instructions of the party. I mean the Communist Party, of course. Come in. Hi. Sorry?
Oh, in a moment, wait outside. No problem.
Okay. Any other interruptions? No? Okay, so let's continue. Within a couple of days, still nearly 1 year before the actual enquête, as one of the vice presidents of the Dance Association, the leader of the dance program at the Theatre Academy, and herself a modern dancer choreographer, Szentpál reacted to the proposal. In her reply, she admitted, and this is her original reply, so it's very carefully written and quite thick in the material. So she replied, she admitted that I must practice my self-criticism. Neither to inside nor to outside have I not recognized the importance of this, I mean modern dance question. Until 2 years ago, I had still believed that apart from ballet and folk dance, we need the achievements of modern dance. I couldn't recognize the situation correctly as I wasn't properly educated ideologically, and the Hungarian ballet had not convinced me that the ballet can also be progressive. Since I had the opportunity to see the Soviet ballets and the Soviet masterpieces on film and then on live, I have seen clearly and properly. Now I know that our socialist dance culture must be built on ballet and folk dance, as the Soviet dance artists have proved that only ballet and folk dance are the proper means for the expression of progressive ideas. Now I can see and now know that there is no peaceful transition in dance, so I must battle against the bourgeois ideology of modern dance. We cannot tolerate any leaks through which the reactionary past pours into our society, and we must take only the constructive, the progressive traditions into consideration. My definite opinion is that we must build our dance culture on such progressive traditions as ballet and folk dance, following the model of the Soviet Union. Her words, as a confession, clearly condemned modern dance, describing it as decadent, reactionary, capitalist, containing bourgeois ideology. Modern dance was thus seen as a dangerous Western capitalist invention. At the same time, she also pointed out the model to follow: Soviet-style ballet and folk dance. And this is her lecture, and it continued for hours and hours. It's more than 20 pages long. So you can imagine how long it took to read it out. Then a year later, at the 51 Untitled, in a long lecture, this is the script. Its script is more than 20 pages. Using nearly the same expressions, she publicly condemned modern dance in general and her more than 30 years of involvement in particular. I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision to make, and it wasn't easy to execute it publicly either. At that time, however, such self-criticism, in which an individual condemned himself or herself publicly in front of his or her pupils and ex-pupils, co-workers and the other professionals of the field, by refusing her earlier aims, theories and methods, was expected and taken very seriously by the party. At the same time, it served for them as a life-saving device. After the Untitled, as the proposal had promised earlier, there were articles about the Untitled in the first issue of the newly established dance magazine, Táncművészet. The president of the Dance Association, Zsuzsa Ortutai, herself an ex-Szentpál pupil, pointed out that, I quote her, "We must follow the examples of the leading dance movements of the Soviet Union." End of quote. She also declared that in the future, I quote her, "In order to improve the level of our dance culture, the most important task of our teachers is to improve themselves by acquiring the methods of the Soviet dance pedagogy." End of quote. Another article about the Untitled stated even more clearly and more harshly that, I quote, "All of the participants agreed that modern dance is one of the imperialist trends, one of the," and it's a very special expression, it was very difficult to translate it into English, "the decaying products of the rotten capitalism, which is alien to our socialist art. Modern dancers rejected the progressive traditions, both classical ballet and folk dance, wanted to create new, modern art at all costs, and wanted to achieve it with mysticism, pessimism, and by the depiction of abstract feelings filled deeply by individualism." End of quote. As a result, modern dance was publicly and officially condemned, and the Soviet model was set as an example to follow. Focusing on classical ballet and folk dance, the Soviet model colonized the Hungarian dance scene for decades, erasing any other type of dance methods. And a short conclusion. Forgetting becomes tradition. Though they had significant international connections and media presence, the Hungarian avant-garde experiments existed marginally in both cultural and economic sense in the Horthy regime. Their marginal status was especially relevant for the women working for and in the modern dance experiments. And their achievements already began to fade into oblivion in the late 1930s. After World War II, though there was a short period between 1945 and 1949 when modern dance courses and programs were re-established and taught at various institutions, these were officially closed in 1950. Then the new established State Ballet Institution and the Theatre Academy provided only ballet and folk dance education based on the Soviet model. As the dance historian, the Hungarian dance historian Livia Fuchs pointed out, I quote her, "The teachers of modern dance either finished their career or emigrated after the 1956 revolution, but most of them, after having their sins confessed, retained themselves as ballet, folk, or character dance instructors." End of quote. Szentpál was also integrated into the dance education system as one of the character and folk dance teachers, but as we have just seen, she had to refuse her earlier experiments and connections to the avant-garde and modern dance. After 1951, neither she nor the other ex-modern dancers could not openly and publicly discuss modern dance, the development of individuality and creativity, unless they condemned them. As a result, Szentpál's and the other female choreographers' experiments were mostly forgotten. Some of their experiences, however, were integrated into traditional service-type education and sport, into the training of nurses, mother gymnasts, physiotherapists, and physical education teachers, trainers of modern gymnastics, and then rhythmic gymnasts. For decades, until the end of the 70s, modern dance ceased to exist in Hungary. The communist and then the socialist regimes made every effort to erase these earlier experiences. Now the contemporary researchers of the avant-garde and modern dance, however, should help to identify a range of performing women diverse in their approaches and aesthetics, yet committed to producing challenging art. All we need is to focus on what Susan Bennett suggested about the task of contemporary theatre historiography. She referred to Clifford Siskin, who, I quote, argues so effectively in showing us how the great forgetting became the great tradition, and he reminds us too that remembering is only one particular task. Attention more extensively to how we forget should make us determined as theatre scholars to seek new articulations of theatre history. End of quote. New articulations and new narrations which include women dancers and choreographers and tell the full story of their contributions to the avant-garde, modern dance, ballet and folk dance education, sport and everyday life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Of course. And meanwhile, I would invite all the presenters to take their places in front of the audience so we could have a quick Q&A. I think we still have a little bit time for the questions, right?
Should we stand?
Our audience has expanded. Welcome. Go ahead. Yes. So, do we have any kind of burning question that needs to be asked right away? Yes, please. Go ahead. Oh.
Modern dancer is laid in the another way. It's specific of conscience of modern dancer. The women, and they want to remember only, they want to forget when he was attractive, when he was youth. I say about this because I know this one example with another dancer from Czech, Ervina Kupferova. I wrote about her in my article, and he moved to USSR, worked in USSR, and then he moved to Czech and wrote the same text about modern dancer. This is bourgeois dancer, and now we can do dancer ballet like in USSR. This is specific conscience of women, specific conscience of dancer. They want to forget its use for mine. It's not connected with avant-garde or politic and other.
I can't agree with, absolutely can't agree with Anna. I suppose I just like to ask you what forces Olga Szentpál made these statements. Maybe it is kind of double thing.
Yes. The answer is very.
There were a lot of directors who wrote such words.
The answer.
Continue their own artistic way.
The answer is very simple. She wanted to live.
Yeah, exactly.
And she wanted to be sent to a enforcement camp in Hungary.
So there was no possibility.
Yeah, there were several enforcement camps in Hungary. It was also erased from our memory, and after the socialist system changed, it turned out that there were enforcement camps, and they were physically abused. And you could, so these quotations are not funny at all. They seem to be funny, but they were struggling for their lives. So that's why they had to do that publicly, in order to survive.
See, because I see where Edita is coming from, because in Lithuania we had the rather same trend, where some directors were publicly denouncing their superior careers, but still they carried on as much as they could,
yeah.
Of course.
But there was no possibility in Hungary for modern dancers. They had to channel themselves into ballet or folk dance. There was no other possibility to stage.
In theater, it was easier because you could condemn your avant-garde past and then stage Shakespeare in some stylized way, like in Poland, Vogal or Rogošić. So somehow you can go on with your work, not being forced to do something opposite. But in modern dance, it's absolutely impossible.
There's another question and then a third one.
Yeah, very briefly again for Zoltán. There was an interregnum at the end of the Second World War, when there was, firstly from March '44, there was German occupation and a sort of dual power system. The Horthy government had the German military. Then there was the Socialist regime.
Yeah.
Was that important? I mean, I imagine that Jewish people would have been killed during that period if they hadn't already left. And that might have had
yes, in terms of modern dance, all the modern dance schools were closed at that time. So some of them were closed earlier, but for example, DNS Valeria school was still open, and it was closed at that time when Szálasi took power. So they were also against these modernish European, Western something, and the communist was also against these kind of Western influences and Western things.
You have a question, please?
I have also a question for you, because you know, I guess, the story with Meerholt heritage, because immediately after the Stalin death, Russian art historians started to discuss it. We should retain the name of Semaphores and blah blah blah. And actually, in some years they did it. And my question is about, or maybe it happened, I don't know. Did it happen with this heritage about modern dance after the Stalin death?
No.
Or just
No.
Okay.
Just later, the late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
In the late 70s, some of the dancers discovered that, okay, we are trying to do something different from ballet and folk dance, but we had previous traditions, so let's make them available.
And why? Because in Belarus we have the same, you know, like later in 20 years and so on. But why did it happen?
There were no other institutions, just ballet theaters, and there were not other public spaces. So the roots and the traces remained secretly in, for example, gymnastics. They did some bits and bobs, but I wouldn't call that modern dance.
I have a question to Valentina.
It's a very problem. I'm sorry, maybe my daughter helped me here. Thank you. Yeah.
Because Khvostenko, what an amazing artist, like incredible.
Thank you.
Visual visions and everything. I was interested, especially because we are discussing here, I think 80% of us are discussing the stage designs. Most of our visual material, like photographs, stage design. And after your lecture, I figured out that we do not really discuss, for example, music and musical sides of avant-garde spectacles. And I was very much interested in this jazz opera by
Chechik, yeah.
And also, I think in this sketch from 1926, there was a black woman dancing, like Josephine Baker, I suppose, like it resembles her. So, what was like? I would like to ask the question about the jazz music in Ukraine. How it was functioning at the time? Because as we know, jazz music was the official music for communist Russia, yes, in the 1920s. And how was it in Ukraine?
It actually wasn't in the presentation. Sorry.
По поводу джаза в Украине.
Музыкальные, так как вы разговаривали про сценический
Дизайн.
сцену, визуал и так далее.
Был ли
Спрашивают, вы дизайн музыки, его интересует джаз?
Я не очень сильна в этой теме.
It's not her specific.
Но я могу сказать, что в Харькове возник первый, я думаю, первый тогда на территории Советского Союза джаз-банд. Его организовал Исаак Дунаевский. И после нескольких лет работы на харьковской сцене он уезжает в Петербург, а потом в Москву. Если говорить о джазе, который возникал, это было приблизительно 21-22 год, 1900. Sorry. I'm sorry.
So Valentina thinks that it was in Kharkiv specifically the first jazz band. It appeared в каком году?
1921-22. Я думаю.
20 to 21st years. And then it established and then moved to Moscow and St. Petersburg, like most things actually.
Этот джаз-банд принимал участие в театральных постановках. Да. Исаак Дунаевский. I don't know, maybe my colleagues, Anna Veselovskaya, I don't know, maybe she know about this.
Conference on avant-garde jazz performance.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks, maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was like very interesting that this jazz also functioned as a kind of avant-garde
It was musical stuff, but it wasn't specifically that. That I'm really kind
Да. Нет, были современные композиторы, я думаю, Леташинский, наверное, да, правильно, если о нем я говорю.
There were three stages of Chechik, this opera in Ukraine, in Hungary here. It's very huge. And Brandt also staging in Hungary.
Машинист Хопкинс. Машинист Хопкинс.
Because just very popular in Soviet Union and in Ukraine until 1929. And 29, this is a year when almost closed, destroyed.
Yeah, because like, it's interesting that it was like official music, communist country in the 20s. So. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Do we have a we have a question? Oh, sorry.
Also know the film, Soviet film Funny Boys with Joseph and some
And we have a question at the back. Go ahead.
It's more of a comment.
Yeah.
I have not been in this group since you were last year, and so this was all new to me, and I was very perplexed when I saw the reclaimed word used, because being Greek and far from the Central European, as much as we studied as dramaturgs, it's never the same as being there. I thought, why reclaimed? By whom? By what? By why? And it seems to me that with all the things I heard, it's a lot of re-establishing and a lot of recognizing, especially after the last presentation, that needs to take place for things that I think do not need to be reclaimed because they were, if you know what I mean. And unfortunately, I will not be able to be here in the afternoon because I have another meeting at 2:30. But I consider myself to be very lucky to be let in this group. I'm here for the immersions group meeting tomorrow. But I found this at first very difficult, but then so revealing and really proving the point that I think very rightly so, it's gray, very reclaimed, because I think it's there, and it just needs to be re-recognized in some. Of course,
because we had a lot of problems with the English name. In Polish, it's very simple. It's odzyskane.
It's no criticism. It's
No. Just help us. We use in Polish odzyskane. So it means that something was there. But it was forgotten, lost, and now we are coming and we're trying to
remember it, yeah.
to regain it.
Yeah.
I'm always making the mistakes. The girls are laughing at me because we decided to call it reclaimed avant-garde, and I'm always using regained avant-garde.
You know why? Because I think reclaiming means like you want to take it away from someone who has it, and it's not the case.
It's not the case, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions? Go ahead, please. Well, I was just curious about comparing Višnja's and yours presentation. I was kept thinking about this idea about the architects theater that came up yesterday, and all of a sudden we have a very strong artists, like stenographers theater, and I found that curious, and especially when we have this very nice continuation of the things that we have in the second part of the 20th century.
I would just like to emphasize that Sergije Glumac was educated as an architect, if only for one semester. But I wanted to include that in my presentation. Maybe you just missed it because it was half a line. Because I think it was very important for the way he perceived stage as something that is material, three-dimensional, geometrical bodies, and not just surfaces moving around, and also mobile in a way. So, and also I think that would be the difference, perhaps, between something that he did as an architect, that was a simple, clear cut, and what, for example, Newman did as designers.
Right. And
Just
then maybe it's me, but I just I followed the visuals of Višnja's and Valentina's presentations, and I saw this repetition of images of Adolphe Pia, and then of the Gordon Craig, and in Ukrainian case, the Sonia Delaunay was present there all the time. I mean, it was a sort of the recycling of the imagery, right? Which again opens the idea of recycling as such, opens up another field of questions and issues in terms of avant-garde movements. Right? Any more comments, questions? If not, so we should thank our presenters for those wonderful presentations.